Yeah.
This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What are we waiting for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
How's it going, my geek and geekettes? It's another week, which means another geek. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger, showing you around all the fascinating things in life with a childlike wonder that, unfortunately, a lot of us have kind of forgotten. So my goal here with Geek Therapy Radio is to re-inspire that in you. Make sure you are following and liking and subscribing, all that good stuff, to Geek Therapy Radio all over social media. That's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, other stuff. Just Google Geek Therapy Radio and follow any social media that comes up. I have often wondered what it takes to, if I may be so frank, have the balls to try to achieve any sort of speed record, let alone the land speed record. Right now, I'm going to share with you the words of Andy Green. He set the world land speed record back in 1997 in his turbine-powered car, and I just think it's fascinating to hear his own words. Let's listen in for the next 5 minutes.
It's a popular misconception that driving a land speed record in a straight line is about anchoring the steering wheel, planting your foot to the floor, and just waiting till you run out of fuel. If only it were that simple. The car moves around an awful lot. Any road car moves around a little bit, and it moves around more so as you go faster. When you go a lot faster, like 700 miles an hour faster, the car moves around a huge amount. The wheels are now skimming across the surface, the shock waves are generating uneven forces, gusts of crosswind, the car is sliding all over the track. In terms of doing a run in thrust SSC, big intakes very close to the ground, I'd put very little power on to start with to accelerate the car without sucking lumps of desert into the intakes. So initially just inching the throttle forward, letting the car roll slowly, progressively, around about 80% RPM on the engine. That's quite a low power setting. Just letting the car accelerate no faster than a normal family saloon car would, pulling away from the lights. Rolling up through 10, 20, 30, all the way up through 50, 60 miles an hour. The reheat nozzles at the back of the engine start to close down to increase the thrust output. Now accelerating more quickly through 90, 100 miles an hour. Now I've got really strong airflow into the engines. Now I can spin them up very quickly. Ease the throttle forward to the dry stop. The turbines spin up to maximum speed. They are now working flat out. To get more thrust, neat fuel goes into the exhaust and literally reheats the exhaust. Reheat. Check that both needles are showing a light up so that both light together. If one lights and the other doesn't, the car's going to want to go in a circle, which is not good at supersonic speeds. Having got both lit, ease my foot all the way down, both nozzles open fully, we get absolute full power and the car is now accelerating at something like 25 miles an hour every second. 250, 275, 300, 325, and it just keeps going at that speed, up to 500, up to 550, approaching 600 miles an hour. The airflow starts to go supersonic underneath the car, which affects the handling. It goes supersonic over the top of the car. It's the loudest, highest pitched scream I've ever heard. The car tended to pull, because of the way it was constructed and the staggered rear wheels, tended to pull hard left at around 600 miles an hour, and that was requiring up to 90 degrees of steering lock to keep it straight. And on our first supersonic record run, it was such a hard pull, I actually had to throttle back to minimum reheat and close the reheat nozzles right down to reduce the thrust, rebalance the car. The car is now 50 feet offline, and I'm steering it effectively on the throttle at 650 miles an hour. As the car starts to respond, as soon as it starts to come back towards the line, I've got to put full power on or we won't get supersonic. And as it comes back to the line, take the opposite lock off, straighten the car back up. Now it's going supersonic. At over 700 miles an hour, all the airflow settles down, starts to go fully supersonic, and it runs absolutely as straight as a die. Through the timing lights, which took 4.5 seconds, about 4.7 seconds to cover the mile through the timing lights. Unbeknown to me, we're also throwing a huge sonic boom out across the desert. My job is still only half done. I now need to stop the car at the other end of the track. So throttling back at the end of the measured mile, we've now got warning captions for all of the oil throwing towards the front of the engines because it's slowing down so quickly. The low fuel caption is flickering. The car is now slowing down at over 1G, over 20 miles an hour per second, but very rapidly as the car gets subsonic. We've got a 10-ton car, very slippery 10-ton car, still hammering along at over 500 miles an hour. I'm waiting until the distance at the end of the track equals the speed I'm going, which is also changing. And when the two numbers match, punch out the parachute with a button on the left-hand steering wheel yoke, and immediately parachute goes out, generates another 4 or 5 tons of drag, and bumps the deceleration back up to 20 miles an hour per second. The car is now going to slow down, and I'm still checking the numbers, slowing down through 400, 350, 300 miles an hour. There's about 2 miles left to run, 250 miles an hour, 200 miles an hour, we've got a mile left to run. I'm now going to shut the engines down. They've had a few seconds to cool. We don't want to ingest anything else. So shut the engines down, start to ease on the wheel brakes. I'm now looking about half a mile ahead, looking at the recovery crew, so that as we roll to a stop, I ease the brakes on and we stop exactly 14 miles from where we set off, right next to the guys who've got to turn a 10-ton jet car around, put the best part of a ton of fuel in, reload the parachutes, do a full systems and data check, and confirm it's safe to go back through the measured mile within 1 hour. So stopping in the right place is the key bit to starting the pit stop on the fastest car in the world. The drive then involves repeating all of that and subsequently stopping the car at the other end and waiting for the timekeeper to have recorded it. 15th of October 1997, he came back with those famous words, "Pit station, this is USAC timing, I have some times for you." And they were supersonic, and that record still stands today.
Two of my favorite things from that account is that when he turned off the engines, the G-force from just the natural deceleration against the wind was enough to set off the oil warnings, because all the oil in the engines lumped to the front of the engine under the G-force of decelerating. That was very fascinating. I also loved his very dry, concise, very British way, very pilot way of explaining the phenomenon of everything that was going on in achieving the land speed record. That was amazing. Of course, a minute on the way out here for Audi Central Houston. You can start your new Audi search at AudiCentralHouston.com. Sometimes it's fun just to open up your tablet and peruse through all the sexy Audis they've got there at Audi Central Houston. And like I've said before, all the technology, all the fuel efficiency, all the safety, there is an Audi for every budget, from the A3 to the R8. And speaking of speed, you take that R8 to the track, you're looking down the barrel at 200 miles an hour. That's quick enough for anyone. I don't care how you slice it. That is just fast. So start your search at AudiCentralHouston.com and then go visit my friend Danny Posey, the GM of Audi Central Houston, and pick out your Audi. The sexiness, the technology, the fuel efficiency, everything you need in any Audi at any budget at Audi Central Houston. Guys, I've been a customer of Audi Central Houston since before this radio show, so believe me when I tell you they will take care of you at Audi Central Houston. So, before I started to record this segment, I was reading some things, two things that I should not have read right before a segment, recording a segment, because this segment I wanted to deal with some kind of geeky medical type things. But in my distraction, I started reading an article about the physics behind turbulence. You might just be thinking about airplane turbulence, and that is one thing. It's basically, I don't even want to explain it, because technically there is no definition that scientists agree on. And the problem of turbulence is not a solved problem. And basically that was the article I was reading about. It was very deep, very heady. It's fluid, has to do with fluid dynamics, and fluid dynamics is anything that flows. So there's air and gases, of course, water, but it can also be very fine granular things like sand. Like think of an hourglass, or sand, rolling down a hill past some like sticks or rocks on the surface. The turbulence is what happens when that free-flowing material hits an obstacle or goes around and has to go around an obstacle. And needless to say, it is mind-bending. I don't even know how far I got into it, maybe an eighth of the way through. It's a pretty long article, and I was like, okay, I'm with you so far. Leonardo da Vinci, he started to draw the flow of water around. He put objects in water, and he would draw the flow of water around it. So think of like a ship rudder behind a boat and how the water kind of deflects off the surfaces of the rudder. Since Leonardo da Vinci was such a great scientist, but also such a great artist and painter and drawer, he was able to, for the first time ever, depict it in such an intricate way to capture the phenomenon of turbulence in such an intricate way and the flow of water in such an intricate way. So what all I'm saying is it got my mind, it's warped my mind. It created turbulence in my mind, so to speak. And then I said, okay, well, I'm going to read something else real quick before I get into this medical segment. So I go over to another article, which is basically to say that, which basically said, sorry, see, my brain is still messed up. That's what happens to geek brains sometimes. We get just so overcombobulated with things flying in our brains and ears and eyes. This article said that Stephen Hawking's final paper has been published. Stephen Hawking died a year or so ago, maybe less than a year ago, I believe, but his final work has been published, and yes, it has to do with black holes, and if black holes have memory, that is to say, if information goes into a black hole, is there any way to extract the information from what went into the black hole out of the black hole? Do we know what went in the black hole based on what comes out of a black hole, or radiation that comes out of a black hole? So there's a Hawking radiation, and it goes off on all that stuff, and that black holes give off heat, so technically they are subject to entropy, and that's Hawking's radiation. And yeah, you get my point here. My brain's done been frazzle-dizzled. My brains are frazzled. Why am I so worked up over this? It's because my brain's going a mile a minute. Let's go into the neat medical things. I promise we're going to bring it down a notch. There's a new study being done in medicine called the honest placebo. So basically what a placebo is, we all know what a placebo is, but basically what it is, to bring us back up to speed, is that someone says, here, take this Advil, and then you take it and your headache goes away, and then after your headache goes away, they say, surprise, that wasn't medicine at all, that was just a sugar pill. There was nothing in it at all other than filler or flour and sugar or something. It was not Advil. Yet, when you take that medicine thinking that it was Advil, your headache goes away. So this honest placebo study is going into saying, is deception a key ingredient of the placebo effect? Is the deception of telling somebody this is Advil, take it and it'll cure your headache, is that deception what cured the headache in that case? So what this honest placebo is saying is takes the deception out. It gives somebody saying, this is just a placebo. This is not actually medicine, but take it and you'll feel better. Basically, it's the study of whether or not drugs work even though you tell patients that the drug is fake. And it's a very interesting study because they found that in some cancer patients, when people are going under chemotherapy and other sort of cancer treatments, that they feel so fatigued and run out and run down, that if you tell them, here's medicine for that, here's a caffeine, or if you say this is not a real caffeine pill, but it'll make you feel good like caffeine, or feel more energy like caffeine does, you take out the deception and you're just basically telling them it is a placebo, and then they still feel better, which is the case sometimes now. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a chemist or anything like that. I'm not a pharmacist at all. I have this kind of... I don't know how to explain it, which I guess is why this study is so important and fascinating to me. You basically have told the person, this isn't the medicine you think it is, right off the bat. And they take it and then they feel better, knowing that it's not medicine. Or that it's not what they've... Am I explaining that clearly? Probably not. When somebody knows they're taking a placebo, you tell them they're taking a placebo, and then they feel better anyways. That's the phenomenon that we're studying now. To move on to a different medical type story, Amazon has filed for a patent. Was it Amazon? I believe it's Amazon has filed. Yes. No, they've patented technology. Sorry, they've already got the patent. And basically it would let Alexa, sorry if that sets anything off, Alexa, cancel. Basically, you tell your machine, you talk to your machine, Alexa hears you, and it can analyze your voice, not only to analyze your emotional state, that is, when you're talking to your Alexa, it can notice that, hey, this person is sad, or they can hear you, or the machine can hear you crying in the background or something like that. Or they hear that you're depressed. They can say, oh, maybe you want to talk to here's a list of therapist numbers or psychologist numbers or whatever. But also just as interesting, when you ask Alexa to play some music or whatever, and Alexa hears a scratch in your voice, hears a scratch in your throat, and thinks you might have a cough or you might have a sore throat, and it might suggest, do you want to order some cough medicine? And by the time Amazon drones are flying all over the place, that means you could have your cough syrup in minutes. Because this device has sensed that you're sick, possibly sensing that you're sick before you even know you're sick, if that's even possible. We bludgeoned through this segment. I bulldozed through that segment because my brain was so frazzled, but I'm proud of it. That's what geeks do. Our geek brains get scattered and we get onto all sorts of topics and whatever. As they say, it is what it is, which I hate that saying, by the way. Anyways, 30 seconds here for Audi Central Houston on the way out. A3 to the R8. They are all packed with technology. They are all packed with safety. They are all packed with fuel efficiency. Did you know an R8 gets well over 20 miles to the gallon? That thing will do over 200 miles an hour and still get well over 20 miles a gallon. Isn't that incredible? I think that's just amazing. Go visit Audi Central Houston right there on 59 and tell Danny Posey that Geek Therapy Radio sent you. He's the general manager at Audi Central Houston. But before you go to Audi Central Houston, I'm still frazzled, visit AudiCentralHouston.com to begin your search. Okay, so picture you're an astronaut, or as will be made relevant, a cosmonaut, and you're sitting on a to say multi-million dollar is an understatement, sitting on a multi-million dollar rocket, multi-tens of millions, multi-hundreds of millions of dollar rocket. Point is, you're on a big-ass rocket. All that fuel, all that power, all of that potential for disaster, as we've seen over the years, over the decades of space exploration, that disasters can and do happen. They still happen. Challenger, Apollo, what is the latest? Columbia. There have been disasters. You know, I was telling a colleague today, we were talking about it. Being an astronaut, I'll just say astronaut. I'm not going to be concise about cosmonaut or Chinese astronaut or whatever the title is for anything. I'm just going to say astronaut. The job of astronaut is still extremely deadly. If you look back through the history of how many astronauts there have been versus how many astronauts have died, even in 2018, the odds of you dying as an astronaut are extremely high. What are the odds of dying on an airplane? It's like millions to one. Your odds of dying on a commercial airliner are almost insignificantly low. Your odds of dying as an astronaut are staggeringly high. Just going from statistics. So today, as of recording right now, it is October 11th, 2018. A cosmonaut and a NASA astronaut were strapped to a Soyuz rocket, and they were going to the ISS, the International Space Station, to relieve some crew up there who are still currently on the ISS right now, stranded. Stranded is a harsh word. Maybe it's not the best way to describe it, but they are waiting for their ride home because their ride home experienced a malfunction about 2 minutes after liftoff. And let me tell you, as if I friggin' know, you don't want to experience any sort of malfunction when you are strapped to a rocket. So just imagine you are one of those astronauts and cosmonaut up there on the Soyuz rocket, and you experience a quote-unquote booster malfunction. So here's what happened. There was a booster malfunction. I don't know exactly what happened. It's just vague. Booster malfunction. I think I've read somewhere that it could have been a failure to separate. Something happened during the separation of the boosters in whatever the second stage is. There's a malfunction at that point, I believe. At any rate, it made the cosmonaut and astronaut initiate an emergency abort, resulting in a steep but potentially deadly descent back to Earth. It is steep by design because it's meant to get you back to Earth quickly, because you do not want to be up there at the edge of space or in space very long. You want to get back to the safety of Earth. It still takes a few minutes to get back. It took them a few minutes to get back down to Earth from where they were at. But the interesting thing is that they were high enough above the atmosphere that part of the descent, part of the emergency abort and this steep descent back to Earth required them to basically punch back through the Earth's atmosphere. And just like we talked about with the rocket car in the first segment, just the force of the air pushing back against an object in motion, these two astronauts, the astronaut and cosmonaut, experienced G-forces over 7 Gs. So, geez Louise. Now imagine you weigh, let's say you're 200 pounds. I'm not going to say you're fat. Let's just say you're 6'5" stacked. And you weigh 200 pounds. That's not even that stacked. Let's just say you weigh 200 pounds. Multiply that by 7. Now you weigh 1,400 pounds. No matter what the exact weight the astronauts weighed, they actually experienced G-forces over 7 Gs. So I can make this joke appropriately. For at least a little while during their descent, they experienced their 1,400-pound life. There's a show on TV called My 600-Pound Life. Just imagine that for a few minutes, for a long enough time, it is your 1,400-pound life. Has there been a person that has weighed 1,400 pounds? Is that even, I think 1,200? I want to say 1,200 is about the upper limit. I don't know. And I'm not ashamed that I don't know the exact figure there. Yes, I could look up Google. By the way, have you ever noticed that Google and search engines are on everything now? Can I vent for just a minute here about how annoying it is to work in a radio station, let's just say. It could be anywhere, I guess, but since we're a radio station and we're kind of like a hub of information, sometimes we get callers, bless their heart, calling in to ask me. I'll always remember one in particular. Is Roy Orbison dead? Roy Orbison dead? Well, I don't know, sir. Can you whip out the thing that you're talking to me on a device, most likely, that has Google on it? I didn't say this to him. I wasn't this snarky with him. But it baffles me that there's still people who call in to ask questions like that when said question could be addressed instantaneously with any device, up to and including now for years actually, your refrigerator. You've seen these commercials? There's refrigerators with screens in them, with Google and Alexa and all sorts of things, and Samsung's Bixby garbage. The point is, you can pretty much ask your coffee maker now. That's not too far-fetched. You can pretty much ask your coffee maker now, how many quarts are in a gallon, or when did Stevie Ray Vaughan die, or what are the top 40 pop singles right now. You could ask a pencil sharpener all this information and it will return it to you because of the Internet of Things. So why a human being would call up a radio station to ask me something that can be answered instantaneously by almost any device in their house nowadays is bewildering to me. Where the heck was I going with all of this? All right, well, so I guess I'll leave it like this. I'll wrap up the story about the astronaut and cosmonaut who had to make an emergency abort. They're fine. Another fascinating thing about it is that they landed safely hundreds of miles away from the launch site. The entire mission in length was like 2 minutes. They were under rocket boost for about 2 minutes, plus them falling back to Earth. And that wound up... How far away do you think they could get in that amount of time? Like, it's one of those things that maybe not a lot of people kind of even think about, but they got hundreds of miles away. Can I address something right now that I'm thinking about it? Because I've wanted to address it here on Geek Therapy Radio many times. And that is, Shannon's walking in, so she's going to be on the show for a second. She doesn't know it. That is, flat earthers. Shannon, what do you think about flat earth stuff?
Flat earth, that's nonsense. It's crazy. Facts don't matter anymore.
Yeah, they're alternate facts.
Yeah, that's not okay.
That's not okay. So I saw one of my friends on Facebook posted this thing. It was like SpaceX. The rocket's going up and they curve. Like they go up, they don't just go straight up.
Yeah.
They go up and then they roll and curve along with, the Earth's curve.
Yeah.
Because the Earth is curved.
Yeah.
That's the reason they do it. And to go into orbit means that you have to do an escape velocity and then follow the curvature of the Earth.
How do the flat Earth people not handle, how do they not communicate with NASA?
They don't understand physics. If a rocket went straight up in the air, just straight up, it would come straight back down. Because you need to have that lateral velocity to stay in orbit.
I thought we dealt with this in 1492.
We did deal with this in 1492 when we sailed the ocean blue. Mm-hmm. What does that have to do with physics?
Well, it means there isn't a flat Earth.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Because one of the things is a ship going over the horizon is supposed to prove that there's not a flat Earth. Because it's not... Flat earthers would say it's falling off the edge of the Earth back in the day.
Yeah.
But really, it's just going 12 miles away, and 12 miles is about the horizon if you're at sea level, and it just goes over the horizon so you can discover America. Speaking of discovering America, you can discover America on the open roads in your brand new Audi from Audi Central Houston. What the heck accent was I just doing there? Before you go to Audi Central Houston and tell Danny Posey that Geek Therapy Radio sent you, you can start your perusings at AudiCentralHouston.com. All budgets from the A3 to the R8, all are packed with technology and safety and fuel efficiency. That R8, by the way, 25 miles to the gallon on the highway and 200 miles an hour. AudiCentralHouston.com. As we know, electronics and computing power is getting more and more powerful. We're technically sort of seeing a slowdown of Moore's law, but regardless, things are getting more efficient, aka they can produce less heat, and when you can produce less heat, that means you can make them more powerful, and devices are getting smaller. All the while, the cloud, you've heard of the cloud, that's just information that is not stored on site, basically. So if you take a picture on your phone and you store it in the cloud, that means, if we're going to talk about Apple for this example, that Apple has your photo on one of their hard drives. You can access it instantly whenever you want. For instance, when I record these shows, I usually record them at the radio station and then I put them on my Dropbox. Dropbox is the cloud, so that when I go home to my home computer and edit it and put them together, I just pull them off Dropbox, aka I pull off these segments, this audio data, off the cloud and edit it together. So we've got devices becoming smaller and more powerful, and we have the ever-increasing cloud. With an ever-increasing cloud, we also have streaming services. So Netflix, every Netflix show you watch is stored, quote unquote, in Netflix's cloud. It's offsite. It's stored on Netflix's servers. So where I'm going with all of this is that the next burgeoning thing on the horizon it's called game streaming. Well, NVIDIA calls it game streaming, but basically what it is playing video games in a Netflix style service, meaning that you don't have a copy of the video game on your computer. You are just sending data back and forth from your controller or your keyboard. Your controller or keyboard is controlling something in the cloud. And the cloud is sending you back a video signal of the game on your screen. So, for instance, let's say you are going to play Call of Duty. You're going to play Call of Duty using a game streaming service, meaning the Call of Duty game is actually being run off-site. It's being run in a server rack somewhere 1,000 miles away. But you're sending data through your keyboard and through your controller to that server 1,000 miles away, and in return, that server is throwing you back an image, the video of you playing the game. And all this happens in the blink of an eye, more or less. As I've touched on previously in previous Geek Therapy radios, the latency is getting lower and lower with this technology. And I believe Verizon's rolling out their 5G service, and one of their claims to fame with that, one of the selling points, is that there's a less than 10 seconds ping back and forth. That means it takes 5 milliseconds for your computer to send something out, and then 5 milliseconds for Verizon's for the server to send it back to you. So less than 10 seconds round trip, 4 seconds and 4 seconds, or 4 milliseconds and 5 milliseconds. The point is, below a certain range, before a certain millisecond range, let's say you're playing a game at 60 frames per second, one frame of that, what is it, 10 milliseconds? Would that be for one? No, 60 milliseconds. Yeah. 60 milliseconds. That's one frame at 60 frames per second. Unless I'm getting my math way wrong. I'm doing this all on the fly here. Once you get the latency low enough to where effectively the brain can tell no difference between you making your character jump and your character actually jumping, that's a magical threshold that we are striving for with this online video game streaming. That's not even my end point with this segment. I'm just telling you what we have right now, that we do have this technology right now. I do have on my NVIDIA Shield tablet, I can play games through that tablet, very graphically intensive games. I can play Just Cause 3 on my tablet because NVIDIA has a farm of graphics processors 1,000 miles away that's running the game. And I'm only sending them input data. So I'm putting all these stepping stones before you to get to this main point. With such rapid growth in off-site computing, up to and including gaming now, NVIDIA just recently released their latest graphics cards, the RTX 2000 series, so 2070, 2080, 2080 Ti, and there'll be more, in the next few months, 2060, 2050, more affordable cards. But my theory here is that the age of consumer graphics cards is coming to an end in the next decade or so. Now, before you yell at me, I know what you're thinking. No, Johnny, that's not true, because even if you're not playing games, you still need graphics cards to do things like video editing and intense graphics editing, 3D modeling, all that sort of stuff. I get that. I'm not saying that professional use graphics cards will be obsolete. I'm not even saying all graphics cards, period, will be obsolete. I'm just saying there will be less of a dependency on graphics cards for gaming in the future, what with game streaming, Netflix style game availability. There might not be a point if all you want to do is play the latest Tomb Raider. You don't necessarily need to go drop $1,200 on a new graphics card to play the latest Tomb Raider, because you'll just let the graphics farm, the graphics server 1,000 miles away, handle all that graphical heavy lifting. Once that happens, once theoretically gaming quote-unquote PCs, gaming computers, or gaming hardware like PlayStation or Xbox or whatever is rendered obsolete because the user, on the user end, they don't need the horsepower on their end. All the horsepower and heavy lifting is being done on Sony's end or on Microsoft's end. There will be less of a need for consumer-grade graphics cards. Now, once that happens, it's only a matter of time before you don't need the horsepower on your end to edit videos, so to speak, or 3D render or do CAD design. You can have all the horsepower being done off-site, meaning that we can all have these thin and light, sexy devices that can perform these amazing things over the cloud, because all the heavy lifting is being done in some centralized off-site location. That's amazing to think about. That's going to do it for Geek Therapy Radio this week. Thank you for listening. Be good to each other. Be the good in the world, starting with yourselves. Be good to yourselves, my geek, and I'll see you next week for more Geek Therapy Radio. I've been your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Take care until next week. One final minute here on the way out for Audi Central Houston. You can pick up your new Audi at Audi Central Houston after you've already done the pre-perusing on AudiCentralHouston.com. You're choosing an Audi in any budget, from the A3 up to the A5, the A8, S8, RS, R8, R8, all the monikers, all the price ranges, anything you need you can find on AudiCentralHouston.com. And when you go to Audi Central Houston in person to pick up your Audi, tell them that Geek Therapy Radio sent you. Danny Posey is the GM over there at Audi Central Houston, just off 59. Audi Central Houston, by the way, is the biggest Audi dealership in North America. They do amazing work over there. I've been a customer with Audi Central Houston since before my radio show, so when I tell you to go visit Audi Central Houston, you know it's coming from the heart, and that I know they're going to take great care of you at Audi Central Houston. Kung Fu Saloon. You know you're sexy because you're a geek, and geeks are sexy. Where does a sexy geek go on a Friday, Saturday night, or even a Thursday afternoon? You go to Kung Fu Saloon at 5317 Washington Avenue. Great food, great beer, great drinks, and arcade games. I always tell you, step to me on Street Fighter 2 if you want to get your geek booty served. Hadouken! That's Kung Fu Saloon, 5317 Washington Avenue.